If we're live.
Oh, do you know hit the button? Is that that top switch, Linda? I never, oh, okay.
The white one?
I thought it was.
Or the silver one?
No,
The top,
silver one.
the top one,
So the white.
the top one.
Nah, that's, it's something else.
Oh, Ryan knows how to,
I did the white one.
No, the white one has to be up, but there's another, and I never remember which one.
no, sir. Oh, yes, sir. Now we got it.
The power button looked promising.
So somebody should just label that.
It says power. I don't know.
Oh, all right. There you go.
You should be live.
Yeah.
All right.
Nelson won't be joining us, so I'll just come with this mic.
Yeah, I just brought one for everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting of the Ordinance Committee to order, tonight being May 8th, Tuesday, it being 6:33. With me, I have Counselor Anderson Burgos, I'm Counselor Linda Vacan, and Counselor David Bartley. This is for our press in attendance. So, I'd entertain a motion to take up item 1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So item 1 is the previous meeting minutes, which we all did receive, and...
Yeah, just under discussion, I want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes, but just make a quick amendment.
Okay, and do you want to offer the amendment?
Yeah, so Ryan did a great job as per usual. The item 5 in the minutes, we originally passed that, and then we made a motion at the back end to reconsider it. So what Ryan did was he kind of encapsulated item 5 as a yes vote. Mm-hmm. Then we took it up again at the back end of the meeting, and we motioned to reconsider it, and we put it on the table. So I just want to combine those two discussions into one at the back end of the meeting, but otherwise it's fine.
Okay. Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll accept a motion.
Motion to approve is amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That brings us to item 2.
Motion to take up item number 2 and to open the public hearing for a brief discussion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we're now in the public hearing for item 2. Item 2, filed by Counselor Bartley, is that the City Council create a temporary sign ordinance that regulates when such temporary signs can be placed in homeowners' yards and on commercial buildings or otherwise in public view. The ordinance should regulate when the signs can be installed, the size, and the deadline as to when they would be removed. The ordinance could then impose a penalty on the property owner and/or the vendor or candidate in whose favor the sign is for. The ordinance should also describe in which city department shall enforce this ordinance. And the order's intent is not to impose regulating the content of the vendor or the political candidate's speech, but only to preserve aesthetic appeal and traffic safety.
So under discussion.
Counselor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my intent tonight, Madam Chair, is just to give a quick update of what's happened between the last meeting and tonight, and then to table this to June 12th. So that's going to be my hope. So
Continue the hearing.
Continue the hearing to June 12th. I've had some really good feedback from Attorney Barnes. We had a meeting relative to this and several emails. She's really raised some very helpful and enlightening points. We also had a very productive discussion earlier tonight, Madam Chair, at the Planning Board, and the members of the Planning Board really gave us a lot to chew on and consider, and in consultation also with Attorney Barnes, The temporary sign ordinance in the city of Holyoke, which is 6.4 point something or 3, I think. I don't have it in front of me, Madam Chair.
Oh,
Yeah, so is that what it is, Chris? 6.4? It doesn't matter. 6.4.3. Anybody can look it up. That's why I write these laws down. So the discussion tonight really brought us to our attention that our temporary sign ordinances are probably not in compliance with Supreme Court law. So this, I think, will open up a broader discussion, which I'm hopeful that most members of the council will find of interest, because we now have a temporary sign ordinance that really is, it doesn't adhere to Supreme Court law. I'll leave it. I don't mean to blow it up like a big thing, but right now it's out of line, and we've got to straighten some things out. So this order, while maybe not as exciting as interesting to some, I think it's going to bear some fruit ultimately. And I want to end on this point that we had a pretty good discussion at the last meeting. It's really not my intent, and that's why I wrote in the order what my intent is. And so let me give you an example. So one of the members of the planning board, Madam Chair, said, Councilor Bartley, what about a sign that gives a political message, though it's not for a candidate? What if it's a political message? And I said, for a perfect example is something like the Black Lives Matter. I said, my intent on this has nothing to do with regulating the content of a sign that says Black Lives Matter, or the Me Too movement, or I hate David Bartley, or whatever it is. It's got nothing to do with that. But Attorney Barnes pointed out that was very helpful, that yes, those, while we're not regulating content, we can regulate time, place, and manner. So she brought out the hope is we can have, with a lot of thinking on this, and we've looped in planning board on this as well, we can regulate when signs are put in the ground, maybe April 1st, and when they can be removed, December 1st. And that's kind of that was kind of the gist of where I'm going with this. So between now and June 12th, we'll get some language out to the members of the committee, and we'll take it from there.
okay. Thank you, Councilor Bartley. Oh, I was going to. Since we are in the public hearing, if there is anyone here in the audience who has come down on this particular issue of the temporary signs, you have an opportunity to speak.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing to June 12th.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up agenda item, is this a public hearing? Agenda item number 3?
No, just to clarify, for agenda item 3, our public hearing is closed.
Oh, sorry.
I put it on the agenda so that if we did receive a recommendation from the planning board tonight, we would be able to act upon it. I did get an email from Damien relative to this agenda item,
Yes.
which I was not able to answer till later, early this evening, because I received it after work. But I let him know where we are in the process, and that we have accepted the draft when our public hearing was open, but that right now, his information certainly is with the planning board that can come back to us again in another format through their recommendation. But at this point, we can't really entertain new information because the public hearing is closed. So right now, we're just waiting to get the recommendation from the planning board, and then we'll be able to take it up, amend it, and send it to the city council. Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. Just the way that I read the email, it was clarifying some points that were confusing at the last meeting, so I don't think there's any new information to accept. I think it's clarifying the exact points that we made at the last meeting, because there was a lot of confusion there, so I just want to make that really clear. I understand that we can't take final action until we get the planning board recommendation, but at the last meeting I also suggested that we could create the ordinance the way that we like it, and at least draft it into a legal form with the information that we have. At the last meeting, Crystal was basically explaining to us that she was in touch with staff, and City Hall staff from the planning department, from the building department, and working with the legal team on drafting language that made sense for that section. And that really, I think we should be able to move forward and come up with some draft text and then compare and contrast what we come up with to what the planning board comes up with. Because I think that they're essentially going to be getting the same advice from City Hall staff on how to mitigate the conflicts and how to create something that's going to work for the city and for the applicants.
What is the pleasure of the committee in this regard? I did have a chance to quickly read the minutes, but I wasn't here for, the depth of the discussion, but
I don't have any motion to make, Madam Chair, at this point. I mean, I know we've got Attorney Wilson here, and we've got Mr. Rome here, and Attorney Barnes. I left the planning board hearing before they addressed the issue.
and we have accepted a draft as part of the public hearing.
So I'll make a motion
For
to allow
consideration.
Attorney Barnes to address the city council.
Suspension of rules. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I got a message that the recommendations being drafted right now, they're gonna be sending something over, so maybe just
Okay.
go on with other business and we'll see what happens.
Yes, that would be great.
Nice.
Okay, thank you. So,
I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, do you want to go on to item 4 in the meantime?
Second.
Yeah, so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4, filed by Counselor Bartley, that the city council review the fee schedule in the blighted property ordinance for purposes of ensuring that our fees do not discourage receivers and developers from buying and rehabilitating housing in poor condition. Specifically, the city should grant receivers and other developers a 1-year grace period in which the vacant building registration fee would be waived, which would allow the developer time to fix a property so that it's ready for occupancy. City council should also be sure that the building commissioner and health department work together and that each department works with developers, receivers, as well as protects the public. Councilor Bartley?
Thank you. So at the April 24th meeting, we had a pretty good discussion. We suspended rules. We heard from 2 receivers and then a third interested party. And at that time, we asked to have representatives of the building department who is here tonight, as well as the Board of Health who are here tonight, to come before us and help us clarify some of the things. I know we have one of the receivers here tonight, Mr. Smalley, so maybe maybe later we want to entertain suspending, allowing him to address. So I would ask that the building department and the Board of Health members come in and join us.
Okay. So is there a second to that?
I second
All
that.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you for coming down, folks. Sometimes we think we're just fixing one little sentence, and then it turns into a bigger discussion, when hopefully we'll end up with a better product.
Well, why don't you move the microphone to Brian, and then just kind of shuffle the microphones down a little bit. Okay, Brian, Damien, Sean, thank you for coming. Okay, so, did you guys have a chance to watch the last meeting, or to review it, okay. So have you given any thought to what we discussed at the last meeting, and we want to get your feedback? We're kind of concerned about some of the vacant building fees that we're imposing, especially on, I mean, the example that right before us is, is it okay if I use your name? Mr. Small? Okay. So we generally don't, but so Mr. Smalley brought this to my attention a couple months ago, and then I ultimately, after doing some due diligence, filed the order. Here's the thing, Brian and Jamie and Sean. He procured a building in Ward 3. I think it's on Congress Street, I forgot the number. He was asked to go ahead and he just bought it a month ago. And our ordinance talks about registering a building when it's vacant. And so he just literally walked into the building and he's asked to put down a vacant building registration fee. And then upon reviewing the legal language in the ordinance, it doesn't allow for that. And yet we have a form, the vacant building registration form, where it says, for residential property units, 1 to 3 units, property vacant for any duration, $100. For residential property units, 4+ units, commercial or non-residential, property vacant for less than 1 year, $500. I guess I understand the intent of it, but that language in your form is not the language that's spelled out in the city ordinance. So that's point one. Point two is when there's a bereaved applicant going to the Board of Health, ultimately he can go to the building commissioner, and the building commissioner has got to, it says in the language, is going to weigh in. And in this case, I don't think it happened, and that's my general understanding. So at this point, I just want to emphasize a point, Madam Chair. I'd like to suspend and allow Mr. Smalley to just briefly address and make sure I hit all the points, and allow Mr. Smalley to sort of recap what he told us at the April 24th meeting. So I'd like to make a motion to suspend and allow the public to address.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. If you can just give us your name and address and make sure the microphone is on.
It's not on.
You have to pull the button forward on the side.
No, you're good.
Ray Smalley, 10 Humeston Slope. My issue is twofold. One, the form that's required to be filled in specifically says that you have an enclosed payment for the length and duration of the vacancy of the property. The ordinance says residential properties for 1 to 3 units, regardless of duration, of $500 after 1 year, okay? The form does not stipulate that. And further, when I went to file it, I was told that it would be filed, but I'd still owe the $500. So there's some confusion in administration as how this should be administered. I'm not the only one with this issue. I work with a bunch of other people, and there have been a number of complaints related to the vacant building enforcement.
So,
Any other detail you were looking for from him?
So, Mr. Smalley, I want to make sure, did I recap it properly?
Yes.
And just to remind us, you purchased the house on Congress Street and you closed on it when?
I don't have the date. It was at the end of February or something.
Okay, I misspoke. I said March, but okay.
I
So it's been a few months he's on the property, and he's working on the property now. And why is he being charged a vacant building fee for? So there's a few things I just want to get some clarification from your perspective, Ryan and/or Damien.
No, I was just,
Hang on one second.
So the interesting case here is that he purchased the property out of a code enforcement case. So this problem, the reason he got shuffled around is they knew that and they sent him to the law department. Unfortunately, it was a prior attorney in our office, Amber Gould, who had handled that matter. There was a court agreement that when he purchased the property, he had to register it. There was some dispute as to whether the registration was simply filling in the form with the Board of Health, or whether that registration would also require him to make the payment when he registered. We've since met and determined that any agreements going forward, I handle all the code enforcement, they'll be very clear as to whether it's a register and pay or register, because we do want to know that they're vacant. So that registration always needs to happen. But as far as payment goes, that's something that will be delineated in agreements. So they did the right thing. They sent him down to the law department, and that's why this issue was a little more in disarray because there was that pending court case that kind of turns this whole ordinance upside down, because anything you sign in court is what's going to come first. So that's why this got a little confusing.
Well, I can add to that. The property was vacant for 2 years or something before I took ownership.
Okay, thanks.
But it seems counterproductive to enforce a $500 fee on the person who's trying to fix the problem.
Thank you. Counselor Lisi?
Yeah, I would just like a copy of the ordinance and the form. I mean, it feels that we're a little bit at a disadvantage because we don't have the material in front of us to reference.
Brian, is your mic on?
We need you to talk into the mic for the folks at
I'm
home
sorry,
and for
it
the
was
public
off.
record. And we just revised this, I would say, within a year and a half, 2 years.
I was here.
Yep.
We discussed it. It was, the revision was the $500, if you see on the front page. Previously, it was 100, then it went to 250, and on our website, we had the 250, and we changed it the day right after the meeting when we found out.
And that, the changes that we made were in response to, like the landlords and tenants, landlords association came with some complaints in terms of navigating the ordinance the way it was written previously, correct?
Yeah, but it was just a discussion. I don't think there was ever any changes made in the ordinance.
I think there were some changes that were made in the ordinance. I mean, this is why it would be great to have copies in front of us.
Well, I understand that if it's vacant for a number of years, a new owner buys it, they don't start from day one. It's been vacant for a number of years, they're responsible to pay. That's how we've been implementing this ordinance. Is that correct?
And my recollection is we modified part of the ordinance for the case where it was a death in the family, because we felt that it was punitive. So we modified that aspect of it. So this discussion has expanded from an order that was filed just to clean up the ordinance because we had a conflict that was created between one part of it being changed and, if I remember correctly, one part not being changed. Am I on the right page, Crystal?
You are right.
Okay, so then the further discussion led to these other discrepancies, so we thought, well, we have it in front of us, we can fix both things. Counselor
So
Bartley.
the ordinance is thus: residential properties with 1 to 3 units, regardless of duration of vacancy, $500 after 1 year. The language the the chairlady referenced, right below that, the foregoing shall not apply to temporary vacancy of 1 year or less due to vacation or pending probate transfer of property. So let me just read that again. Residential properties with 1 to 3 units, regardless of duration or vacancy, $500 after 1 year. So there's not a sign, now Attorney Barnes gave an exception, which we did not have that exception at the last ordinance meeting. And I wasn't aware there was a court order. So that was never brought up to us, and it wasn't brought up to me by Mr. Smalley. So that's brand new information right now. Now, if there's a superseding court order, I guess that's the way it goes. Okay, so we have to respect that. That was not told to me.
Council Bartley, can I just ask you to clarify one thing? So it says 1 to 3 units, regardless of duration of vacancy, $500 after 1 year of ownership of what? It doesn't say
Vacancy.
anything?
So it says residential properties with 1 to 3 units, regardless of duration or vacancy, $500 after 1 year. So if it's vacant after 1 year, or whenever the 1 year starts, it's unclear to me, but there would be there's a.
Can we, before we go on, I really like to just understand what we're looking at there, and I think the Board of Health has some insight for us.
So we've interpreted this at the Board of Health, meaning the regardless of duration of vacancy, my understanding referred to the fees being it would be $500 regardless of the duration of vacancy, meaning there's no scale. and that the 500 after 1 year would be that after the property has been vacant for 1 year, the fees would begin.
So no prorating.
No, and I took the regardless of duration of vacancy to mean that there would not be a, 500, 1,000, that's what we had initially understood.
And I do remember making that change, because previously it was prorated. Yep, and we made it a flat rate with the 500. But I still think that there's a lot of gray area here in terms of regardless duration of vacancy, so flat rate after 1 year. So is that 1 year for the building being vacant or for the owner having a vacant building? I think that's something that we're gonna need to wind up cleaning up.
We have been counseled by the law department, and the way that we have enforced it in previous years is that after 1 year of the building being vacant, regardless of its ownership status, new owners coming in, that the $500 fee begins after the 1 year of
The building.
vacancy in the building.
Okay, well, sorry.
No,
Well, I guess that,
Counselor Bartley
Yeah.
had the floor, I think, originally.
so, I guess, yeah, I don't understand how that could work, but if we can't, then we'll just need to spell it out going forward. I guess that's my take. So we can't, fix what's been done. But here's the point. The goal is, our goal, everybody's goal, is to get vacant buildings back online, to get them rehabbed if necessary, and to get property owners in there. That's the goal. So when a receiver comes in or a developer comes in and buys a house, and there's a property deed that's been filed on record, that's pretty clear indication of when the date should start. So we'll just take 110 Congress Street. He recorded that February 28th, 2018, and if that's been through a court order, he procured it through a court order, we have a start date of February 2018, there shouldn't be any $500 fee until March 1st, 2019. And this will allow him the flexibility to rehab it, and you guys will be able to monitor it.
I would say that as he submitted a rehab plan, he wouldn't have needed to pay the fee. The confusion was simply because it stated on the court order that he needed to register.
Crystal, she just wants to clarify.
So, the problem with allowing it from the date of ownership is that you can certainly evade paying a fee by swapping it between family members, and it's very easy to do. So it's always based on the building's vacancy, and the other reason for that is that it's easier for us to track. If we have to constantly go into the registry of deeds, find out when somebody acquired a property versus when we know it was vacant, it's a much more difficult process. But I mean, it's usually when somebody's pulling it out of code enforcement, because generally if it's vacant, we've got it there. If they're gonna pull it out of code enforcement, they're certainly gonna be in charge of making sure that they're up to snuff with all of our ordinances, that they're gonna bring it back up to code, and part of that is paying the vacant building registration fee. I have receivers that'll come in and they pay it, or they have a rehab plan. So if you wanna come in and rehab a property, that rehab plan is what's gonna get you to waive that fee.
Right.
We actually met this week. We came up with a procedure guide that everybody has now, everybody's on board with, that delineates when charges are gonna happen, how this process is gonna work, where to start when somebody shows up in your office, where do you start? And I think we're all on the same page of how this is gonna get enforced. I don't know if through practice, we may have to tweak the ordinance a bit so that it's clear. I mean, that's something we could certainly do, but I think the way that we have our procedures written is based off the ordinance, how we've always enforced it, and it's gonna do away with some of the confusion of people showing up in February and, okay, what do I do now? And it's like, well, our letters go out in October, so nothing until you find out in October whether or not it needs to be dealt with. And our letters for this year are gonna be drafted in such a way that people are aware of how to do their waivers, how to get deductions on that fee, whether it's permits, fees paid to the city for, maybe you have a dumpster delivered, you pay a fee for that, DPW, fire department, et cetera. So give them a little more push to show them. From what I gather, they actually do give them a copy of the ordinance when they send out the vacant forms, but this, you put something in bold on a letter and people are gonna read it more than a large ordinance. So we have a procedure in place to kind of fix this, but if we're already in court and you're gonna make me stop a code enforcement process because you want to now buy a property, then you take it on with every stipulation that we put in there. So that's a whole different process, and that's step one, is to check with the law department, so.
Counselor Lisi?
Number one, I just want to say it's really great to hear that our City Hall staff had been proactive in dealing with this issue and coming up with some policies and procedures for how to coordinate between the different departments. That's really encouraging to hear. It's user-friendly for both the folks that acquire these vacant buildings, and it's also user-friendly for folks that come to your offices now and need some help and guidance navigating the process. So that's great. And I do remember in drafting the ordinance, a big part of the discussion for why we were making it regardless of the duration of vacancy was exactly because of that discussion of being able to really easily swap properties between shell LLCs and family members, and we want to create an incentive for getting these properties back on track. And so we felt that either you get your building into a rehab program and therefore the fee is waived, or if you're going to sit on your building and wait for other people to, I guess, increase the value of your building before you start doing work on it, we wanted to discourage that type of activity and buildings languishing and being vacant for a period of time. So I think that some amendment may be in order so that we could clarify this for everybody. I think that's something that we could look at here.
Can I add one item?
Hang on.
I'll go for Mr. Smalley.
Okay.
The one issue I've got is that the ordinance is silent on if you pay the fee at registration. It doesn't say that at all. It says you'll be billed in November. So I'm having trouble with, I'm registering a property in February and I'm required to pay $500 then. The ordinance itself says that bills go out in November. So that doesn't make any sense.
Okay, so it says the registration fee set forth in this section shall be due and payable on November 15th. On or before October 15th of each calendar year, the department shall send a billing statement setting forth the required registration fee. So that's here.
Right, so why is the fee imposed when I register? The ordinance does not say that anywhere. The second thing is that the ordinance says that the building commissioner can waive the fee. Okay, so there's internal confusion here. I send an email to Damien, he says, well, I don't impose the fee, I can't waive the fee.
Well, he can waive the fee, so if the ordinance says that, he can, but,
That's what the ordinance says.
okay, so he can do that,
Right,
so, his office can do it.
right, but just to clarify, if I heard correctly, if it's a court stipulated situation, whatever is to be paid is whatever is stipulated in the court, separate from whatever our ordinance says.
Just says I need to register. I did that. The bill should go out in November. That's
So-
what the ordinance says.
Okay, so
So
you're,
just to clarify through Crystal, did this person end up paying the fee or not?
No.
That I
Okay.
don't know, but he also had a rehab plan in place. That was part of the court agreement, so the fee is a moot point here.
Right, so in terms of our current ordinance where it says to register the building, and then it further states that a letter will go out in October.
Correct.
For a bill to be due in November.
So part of our procedures we've discussed is, we're gonna start letters early. We wanna make sure that we have everything squared away. Letters go out October 15th, payments are due by November 15th. Any appeals and late payments are gonna be finalized by December 15th. January 1st, we're gonna start putting liens on. So that gives you plenty of time from that October 15th letter, and they're due regardless if you receive that letter, just like tax payments are due. So as of November 15th, that kind of gives you a little bit of leeway. I know it dragged on for a while this year. We didn't get liens put on until almost March. And I think this process of really having that firm cutoff is going to work well. So say you buy a property in June, or in this case, February.
Right,
We don't want to deal with you until October.
so if the,
But this is a whole different situation. You signed a
Right.
court agreement.
so let's assume it was just a regular situation and the person bought the property in February and they wouldn't be getting a letter until
October.
October. is it correct to say that they would not be obliged to pay any fee until they get the letter, regardless of when they buy the property?
Correct.
Okay. And you feel the ordinance is clear in that regard?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think we are all in agreement that that's how that's going to be enforced, because it's easier to track. So that way, when people are coming in, it's not, is your payment for last year? Are you trying to make back payments? Is it for this year? It's just, let's start collecting fees in November, and we can easily track that.
Gotcha. Counselor Bartley?
So I just want to, I'm glad we have what did you refer to, Crystal?
It's just something simple that the front desk is gonna have up in Board of Health. We
Documented.
have just a vacant building
it's
registration
documented.
kind of procedure that's a little inter-office. Everybody's on the same page.
Now, and speaking on the same page, do we need to refer to something like that in, it's this thing. I'm just gonna move that over. It's kicking back because of the cell phone. Do we need to refer to that in city ordinance that this is gonna be subject to policies and procedures developed by the city of Holyoke?
No, all we did was clarify the language so that everybody knew that this is how it reads, this is how it should be
Your form
interpreted.
summarizes city ordinance?
Correct.
Okay, and I just gotta make a point about, swapping buildings. One, I'd like to see an example of that. I would really be amazed if somebody's transferred, because there is a fee, right? This doesn't just happen. You don't just swap a building. There's a time fee in preparing deeds, and there's certainly a recording fee payable. I would be, I don't want to mess up your system, but your premise was we want to make sure people aren't swapping buildings, and I heard that from other parties. I guess I would really need to see an example of that happening. Does that really occur where?
If you're up against a $3,000 vacant building registration fee and you can transfer for consideration of $1, and I think a deed is $125 to record.
No, I get that, but we're talking about registration fees at this point. I'm not talking about accumulating fines.
That's what I mean.
That would still be outstanding. It would still be of notice. And I think they're on the municipal lien certificate. I assume they are. Our city fines. Are they on the municipal lien certificate?
They will be. We're working on it. Right now, we lien them
okay.
separately, but they will end up, when our computer system catches up, they will be part of the MLC. But for right now, we lien them separately, and we cover our recording costs that way. But $3,000 is actually what's owed on, say, a large commercial property. And people will transfer it out of themselves into an LLC, and they do straw transfers.
But it's still of record. I mean, that lien is still recorded.
It is still of record.
Okay, so the lien doesn't go away. So this notion about swapping buildings,
Well-
I'm missing it.
Because so for example, if we don't lien it, so say it doesn't get liened, I don't know, we did them in March this year. Say they get their letter in October. We don't get around to liening it until January. They get their letter, they can do a swap between October and January. Now the vacancy starts over again under your example. That because they owned it in October 1st, they don't owe that fee for another year. So then they swap it again October 1st of next year. It does happen. It sounds crazy, but it does
But
happen.
our ordinance does not allow that to happen.
Correct. Our ordinance does not allow that, but that's why.
I
That's
just
why
wanna
we
make
look at
sure we're on the
vacancy,
same page here.
because,
Okay.
I mean,
Okay,
I'll take your word for it.
all right. Counselor Lisi.
I just wanted to note the Board of Health had their hand up to make some comments on this item.
Okay.
I think Crystal addressed what I was going to say. It's
Okay,
just-
I
it
didn't
does.
mean to-
We do have some examples of that happening. People transferring between LLCs. So.
Amy?
Just a couple of things to address some of the concerns I've heard so far. We've amended this ordinance twice in 2016, once in 2017, less than a year ago. It was actually 6/6/17 is the last time we amended it. And a lot of the amendments, no ordinance is perfect. So this is something that's only been enforced about 3 years, right? The vacant building registration. So we're definitely working through some of the bumps in the road. And I think overall, if we only have one complaint out of 150 successful stories, it's like we're doing pretty good, but we still have more work to do, right? We don't want people to feel like we're working against them. The forms that are lingering out there, Mr. Smalley brought up, I just experienced it today. You know, when we change the ordinance, all the forms have to get updated. We have to upload them to the website, we can put them in the office. This happens all the time. I still get applications from a pool company from the 90s, and every time I call them and fax them and send them everything and say, here's a new application, they keep sending us the 1990s applications like they got a stack of them in their office. So we're always gonna get that. So, you know, it's like a expired stamp from 10 years ago. Just because, you know, they didn't get the notice that the stamp cost went up, it doesn't mean that the stamp cost more now to mail that envelope. But, so, you know, a couple of things in the favor of a case like this, which I believe this gentleman does not have to pay the $500, is it's not just that the first year, that was a major change, is now made to be open-ended. It doesn't have to be for any reason, but it was to cover these residential properties 1 to 3 years, whether it be because of death in the family, whatever. There is no more fee for that. And we bumped it up to $500 because of the cost for everyone here, including the law department, to record and all that. So I think it was a very good change on both ends. It's better for the people out and the citizens, and also for the city. But it's not just a rehab plan, which could get you the waiver. It's not, the waiver is what I think is what people are using, but it's actually a deferment, okay? So the waiver is saying it's gone, but it's not, it's a deferment. So if you're in good standing, it's deferred until you are no longer in good standing, then we can reapply that fee. So if somebody's in good standing, the deferment goes for year after year after year after year, and they never have to pay anything as long as they renovate the building or the house, which I think has worked out pretty well overall for all the properties we've sort of overseen. And then there's grounds for appeal. So if somebody doesn't have, want to pay that fee, they can file the appeal. I think that's another option people have had, and we sat through appeals this year. Myself, Brian, and Paul Perrin, the law department. I don't think there was an issue with that. And third is, if somebody's renovating property and they don't even give us a rehab plan and they do nothing but take out permits, whether it be an electrical permit, a building permit, or other various permits, they're spending money, that comes right off that. So if it's $500, it's not hard on a big Victorian home to accumulate $500 in permit fees. That's just a wash.
So it goes against that.
So they don't even have to pay it. So there's 3 ways right there alone that I think it's absolutely in the favor of the citizen or the owner or whatnot of the property. And that's the point. So it's not punitive. We're not punishing somebody, say, give us the fee, and oh, by the way, you got to pay these permit fees, and oh, you got this and you got that. It really, on commercial buildings, it's, large buildings, the fees are higher, but so aren't permit fees because they're, commercial rates.
Right, and the whole idea also was to get the buildings rehabilitated. We wanted to make sure they didn't get purchased and then sit there like had happened in the past. Right. So, Crystal, going back to the draft that we had, which got tabled, which was the cleanup draft, I think, to correct just that text issue in blighted and vacant buildings. We had tabled it relative to the definition at the bottom.
Right.
Of,
So part of it was getting rid of that after 1 year, that is kind of an oddity in that section that you all were referring to. There's like a subsection under that clarifies that was just a typo.
It created a conflict.
Right.
So we need to eliminate that.
So that I think is in part of that draft legal form. It's one of the parts in there. Unfortunately, I don't have that one with me tonight, but the rest of it
says deleting subsection D2B1 phrase after 1 year at the end. There you go.
That fixes that issue.
So we were all okay with that, and then the question that had been raised, and I figure while everybody's here.
Sure.
It was around the definition, because the language said, in the case of large-scale renovations or rehabilitation work for over 10,000 square feet of work area, the schedule of time to complete the work may be extended in written agreement with the building commissioner. Determinations for qualifying large-scale renovations shall be made at the discretion of the building commissioner. And there was just some question, should there be a definition of what is large, or should it be a dollar amount rather than a square footage? And these are just the notes that I wrote as why it was tabled.
That's exactly what I remember as well. I don't know if Damien wants to speak a little bit to that.
I'm hoping maybe we could get this done tonight.
Absolutely.
And I can give you a little history on it. So when we first started looking at this ordinance, This was taken, I think, 90% from another community, and the original ordinance said 6 months. Didn't matter what building you got in the city, you had 6 months to renovate it. And I brought it, that might have been the first amendment we made, and I said, that's just not reasonable
Because
because.
they're too big.
Well, there's plenty of buildings that will take longer than 6 months. You look at Hoyle Catholic's renovation, wonderful renovation, and that took years. Lyman Terrace is going to take years. And, a 10,000 square foot building, for a point of reference, I think I mentioned at that time, was the St. Mark's Paint Building. I think most people are familiar with that. It's on the corner of Lyman Street and Maple. It's had the sign up for a while. That's 10,000 square feet exactly. So a building like that should take more than 6 months to renovate, and maybe even, buildings even a little smaller than that. But we've been pretty flexible about it. I've never, looked it up and said, let me find out exactly, you only have 9,000 square feet, and you're giving us, we're more concerned about, is there progress being made? And if they give us a plan and say, we're gonna make progress, we've given people up to 10 years to renovate a building, and we do check in every 6 months, every 3 months, every year, based on their plan. So I don't think there's anything really, that needs to be corrected in that. We could always add more leniency, but the change was to make it much more lenient than what it originally
Than it
was.
had been. Okay, so were there any more questions on this aspect of this draft by any of the committee members or any other counselors here? Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, so I just want to, I appreciate everybody's comments, okay, so thank you for all your comments. And I kind of want to throw this out that what Damien said, that the fees are not a waiver, they're a deferment. So perhaps we should consider changing that language to not say waive, but say defer. I would suggest that we consider that, so that if that's indeed the intent and your understanding, I would like to have that spelled out in the ordinance. And then I just want to make sure that we say in the ordinance that forms will be created as appropriate pursuant to the ordinance, and that they'll be updated. So I want that in the ordinance. If we're going to create forms, I want, and Board of Health or Building Commission or little summary forms, I think it should be stated in the ordinance that this law could be summarized or subject to forms that will be created in and in the
So
possession
you
of.
want to add that as an amendment, that forms will be updated to be in compliance with the ordinance?
Yes.
I think that the forms are in compliance with the ordinance, and what I heard Councilor Bartley say was that he actually wanted, and tell me if I heard you correctly, Councilor Bartley, that you wanted something in the ordinance to say that we have
Yeah.
a cheat sheet version
Well,
to document it in some way.
I do.
that's what I meant when I read this
And it would
as
be-
an amendment to
It
the
would be amended,
ordinance.
yeah, and so that way we can just put the public on notice. If we're doing this, we might as well just put it in the ordinance. I don't see how that could possibly hurt.
Right, it's just when we change the ordinance, we change the forms.
So just reference it somewhere in the ordinance if we could, Crystal. I don't mean to be a pain in the toe, but so just so we could put the public on notice that these forms and these summaries are available from, and mention the law department. I don't even know if we mentioned the law department in this ordinance, and you're critical to the process.
Okay, so can I just clarify on what you said? What I understood was that certain fees that have to be paid by the person pulling the permits, et cetera, go against the vacant building fee. So it reduces the amount of the fee by the amount they're paying for the permits?
It's deferred.
Okay, so it's not reducing it,
Oh,
it's just delaying it.
If I may, the permit, if you apply the permit fees, you are waiving the portion of the fee that is accountable to the permit. So if the permit is for $300, you would waive $300 of the fee. $200 would,
So they would only owe 200.
Correct,
So it
but-
really is waiving the
Deducted.
fee
It's deducted.
against the
Yes.
other expenses that they have to
the
pay.
other half of that
So
is
that's
the
true.
deferral. And it does use the terms deferral and waiver. If
Yeah.
you look at section
Okay.
6.
All right,
great.
so it's written correctly and
Right.
we're doing it correctly. All right, so good. Part of it is waived and part of it's deferred. Good.
Yeah, deferral
Okay.
and waiver.
So as long as the language is matching.
Yeah, and there's two separate functions for deferral and waiver, right? The waiver is related to the permit fees, and then the deferral is I'm sorry, the deferral is which part?
The rehab plan? If
The
you were-
rehab plan.
Yeah, if you're subject to rehab
They-
plan.
yeah,
And
they
that's
haven't-
essentially to ensure compliance with the rehab plan.
Okay, so committee, are there any further concerns or changes in language anybody wants on the part about the rehab plan and what would be a large-scale renovation and leaving flexibility with the building commissioner? Or are we okay with that language as it's written?
I'm certainly okay with it, but I just hopefully we can just get bring it before us one more time, get a draft so we can look it over and then wrap this up in 2 weeks.
Okay, so if what I'm hearing from the committee is correct, we are accepting the draft that was given to us at a prior meeting. It's not dated, but it includes the deletion of the after 1 year, which was the initial problem that we were fixing, right?
And then I can add to that a summary of this ordinance can be found at the legal department or something. And
Right.
I'll
And then-
submit that to all of you. I know this kind of got done this week, so I can submit the vacant building procedures, I guess, that we've created, so that you know what we're referring them to as a summary.
And then we'll add in that the forms will be updated to go with the ordinance. And then I think we're done as far as this draft. So we're amending the draft only slightly.
The amended draft is just to strike the after 1 year. And now we have added a condensed version of the ordinance can be found in the legal department.
Well, there's further amendments than that
Okay.
in this draft. The rehabilitation plan was added with the definition.
That was submitted like weeks ago.
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
we received this probably, what, I don't know.
It was
3
probably a
months
month ago.
It was even longer than that, I think, but, because we tabled it, I think, in April. But,
So if there's multiple changes and not just those two, I would say yes, we should definitely see a draft as opposed to, I mean, if it was only 2 amendments, I would say we could probably forward it along to the full council, but if there's multiple that we want to check out, then maybe it's worth a review.
well, the thing that makes it a little hard to look at is you're looking at just the changes and you're not looking at the whole
The comprehensive
ordinance.
piece.
But I think, got that all fleshed out tonight.
Yep.
So we're making very minor changes to your original draft here. Yeah. So can I have an official,
Motion to accept all amendments and send to the legal department for legal form.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And it'll come back to committee for, do you think our next meeting?
June 12th, is that the next one?
So,
May 22nd.
May 22nd?
I mean, that's fine. I
I
can
mean,
certainly
this-
draft it up. It
Yeah.
sounds, yes, the 22nd.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you all for coming down.
Thank you.
We got it all clarified.
Do we want to go back to item number 3?
Well, yes, I understand we have some communication.
Motion to take up number.
Did we receive it?
Yes.
Not yet, Crystal has it. So we're
Right.
taking up item 3, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 3, filed by Counselor McGee, that section 6.4.7 of the zoning be sent back to ordinance to be amended in order to be in conformity with the rest of the sign ordinances under the zoning code. And I understand we have a communication. Okay, so We have just received this communication from the planning board, so as I'm reading it into the record, I'm reading it for the first time. I'm sure we can get any clarification we need otherwise. I think because we have been on this topic for quite some time now, I think the best way to handle it is simply to read it into the record and consider that part of the review of the recommendation. Okay. So, May 8th. Dear Councilor Vacan, please be advised that the Holyoke Planning Board at their May 8th, 2018 meeting discussed the above referenced zoning text change request to the zoning ordinance. After considering testimony provided throughout the public hearings, the board voted unanimously to recommend to the Ordinance Committee of the City Council the following amendments to the zoning ordinance sections 6.4.6.8 off-premise signs. Purpose. The purpose of the section is to establish general guidelines to preserve and promote the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Holyoke by maintaining and enhancing the visual environment, by protecting areas of scenic beauty or of historic interest, by minimizing the possible adverse effects of off-premises signs on nearby residences, public resources, or private property. General requirements. Off-premises signs shall only be allowed in the off-premises zoning overlay districts as defined as districts I-91 exit 15 and I-391C maps. We have been each provided with maps. B, shall follow the size limitations for signs in the business and industrial districts table IG zoning. C, the number of off-premises signs in the City of Holyoke shall be limited to 12 faces. A face consists of a single-sided advertising area or space. Double-sided would equal 2 faces. 8 faces shall be allowed in the I-91 exit 15 district. 4 faces shall be allowed in the I-391 district.
How do you get 8 faces?
D, off-premises signs shall be governed by special permit reviewed and approved by the City Council. E, all off-premises signs must be approved by the Outdoor Advertising Division of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 700 CMR third in dimension, or relocated without a new special permit. A petition to enlarge or change location shall be subject to the same requirements as a new application. G, all off-premises signs applications, including but not limited to request to alter a dimension or change location, shall be subject to the general regulations regarding special permits found in the Holyoke Code of Ordinances, Appendix A, Zoning, Section 9.3, in addition to the requirements of this section. H, evaluation of off-premises sign proposals is based on distance from public land uses, residential land uses, and for public safety. Where off-premises freestanding signs are installed abutting a residential district or at a gateway to the city, the owner shall install 1 square foot of landscaping for every 1 square foot of signage at the sign base or a mutually agreed upon location within the city. A landscape plan shall be submitted to the City Council for review and approval. The City Council may require an on-site demonstration of the visibility of the proposed off-premises freestanding sign by means of the flying of a balloon or similar at the discretion of the City Council. In the case the council finds that the height of the proposed project will have an impact on the abutting properties, or the sign may constitute a visual nuisance or traffic hazard. This gets very lengthy and technical, but I will wade through it. We have no other way of properly reviewing it. A, the demonstration shall take place after the application for a special permit has been submitted. B, the date of the demonstration must be advertised in a newspaper of general circulation within the city at least 7 days prior to the actual demonstration date at the applicant's expense. C, notice of the demonstration shall be provided at least 7 days in advance to direct abutters, Planning Board, and City Council. D, the demonstration must be for a minimum of 12 daylight hours or the maximum allowed by the season. E, the balloon or similar shall be of appropriate size, color, and material to be seen from a distance of at least 300 feet. F, where off-premises signs are proposed to be installed within the residential or park buffers described in 6.4.7.3 and 6.4.7.4 below, the applicant shall conduct a balloon test or similar as described here to demonstrate that the proposed site is not visible from the residentially used land or park space. K, rooftop premises signs are not allowed in any zone. For off-premises signs, the following criteria apply. A, the sign may not be located within 500 feet of and visible from a park. B, the sign may not be located within 400 feet of and visible from residentially used land. C, the sign may not be located within 300 feet of any other off-premises sign. D, the sign may not obstruct the view of and may not be confused with any traffic control devices and may not cause a traffic hazard. E, the sign may not obstruct any scenic or important view. F, the sign may not contain or project any flashing or distracting lights or images. G, the sign shall be proposed at a height limited to 20 feet above the natural surrounding grade so as to not impede the safe line of sight of pedestrian and vehicular traffic. H, no property shall have more than one off-premises sign without exception. I, may only be permitted on a parcel or abutting lot which has a legally occupied structure. Next section, digital off-premises signs in addition to the above. A, digital off-premises signs shall in any district not incorporate or be lighted by flashing, scrolling, or blinking lights or be designed to attract attention by change in light intensity or direction or by repeated mechanical or electrical motion. B, digital off-premises signs shall not contain streaming video, full motion video, animation, or frame effects. C, the transition time or the time it takes to change each message shall be 1 second or less. D, digital off-premises signs shall have a frame hold time of not less than 10 seconds. E, digital off-premises signs shall be equipped with automatic dimming capability to automatically adjust the illuminative brightness of the display according to ambient light conditions by means of a light detector / photocell. Further, the light produced by such signs shall not exceed 0.3 foot candles over ambient light levels during evening hours. The ambient light reading during evening hours shall be taken at least 30 minutes past sunset with the sign turned off or displaying all black copy. The fully lit reading shall be taken with the sign displaying all white copy. Measurement of the light levels shall be taken perpendicular to the face of the sign and at a distance of 100 feet from the source. F, spillover light exceeding 0.2 foot candles as measured at a residentially used property line is prohibited. G, the owner of each digital off-premises sign shall provide the building department information for a 24-hour contact to be able to turn off the sign promptly should a malfunction occur. H, if after the installation of a digital off-premise sign, the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Highway Administration, or the Mass Department of Transportation Office of Outdoor Advertising concludes that digital off-premises signs are detrimental to traffic safety, the hazard posed by the sign shall be resolved. If the hazard can be effectively resolved by adjusting the brightness, lengths of display, or other such performance standard, then this shall be allowed as the course of action. However, if the hazard cannot be effectively resolved by adjusting the performance of the sign shall be removed and may be replaced with a non-digital off-premises sign. J, digital off-premises signs cannot replace existing off-premises signs that are non-conforming unless the entire sign is brought into compliance with the applicable provisions of sections 6.4.4.2 and 6.4.4.3. K, where applicable, digital off-premises signs shall comply with any and all regulations as outlined in Massachusetts Department of Transportation 700 CMR 3.00, control and restriction of billboards, signs, and other advertising devices as amended. Next section, submittal requirements. The special permit application shall include a site plan prepared by a Massachusetts registered architect, landscape architect, professional engineer, or other appropriate design professional. The site plan shall include the following components and information. A, locus plan, a locus plan showing the location of the proposed off-premises sign or signs and its relation to the existing areas, buildings, and roads for a distance or distances described in sections 6.4.7.3 or 6.4.6.4 from the boundaries of the proposed development or such other distance as may be approved or required by the city council. The plan shall also illustrate all contiguous land leased and/or owned by the applicant or by the owner of the property which is the subject of the application. B, improvements plan, a detailed plan illustrating the proposed sign, its features and dimensions. C, landscape plan, if applicable, a plan showing the limits of work, existing tree lines, and all proposed landscape features, any improvements. It shall contain a legend stating all common botanical names and at what stage of maturity each is represented of the proposed species to be planted. D, details. Detail sheets including but not limited to lighting, fencing, and any site improvements included in plans B through C above. Last page. Proof of liability insurance. The applicant shall be required to provide evidence of liability insurance in an amount sufficient to cover loss or damage to persons and structures occasioned by the failure of the facility. Next section, maintenance. The maintenance and repair of all off-premises signs shall be the responsibility of the owner and shall adhere at a minimum to the following standards. A, if the sign consists of paper, textile product, or other similar products such as paper, textile product, or similar project shall not be peeled or ripped. B, if the sign is painted, the paint shall not be chipped. C, the trim or frame shall not have any missing pieces or broken parts. D, any structural portion, i.e. frame and superstructure, shall be stained or painted. E, there shall not be any overgrowth of vegetation on the ground within 10 feet of the structure of the sign, so long as the cutting of such vegetation is within control of the sign owner and approved by the state if applicable. F, if at any time more than 25% of the digital display lights malfunction or are no longer working, the owner of said digital non-accessory sign shall make repairs to the sign within 30 days, or the sign shall be turned off until repairs are completed. Next section, violations. Any continuing violation of this maintenance requirement for the period of 30 days after written notice from the building commissioner to the sign owner describing the nature of the violation shall be cause for a fine of $100. B, any continuing violation of this maintenance requirement for a period of 45 days after written notice from the building commissioner to the sign owner describing the nature of the violation shall be cause for an additional fine of $250. C, any continuing violation of this maintenance requirement for a period of 60 days after written notice from the building commissioner to the sign owner describing the nature of the violation shall be cause for removal of such sign by the city at the owner's expense. Last section, warranty. This special permit shall be construed to include a warranty by the applicant to maintain the subject off-premises sign or signs in good repair to the reasonable satisfaction of the building commissioner. Should said permit lapse, be revoked, or not be renewed by the city of Holyoke, after notice to the permit holder may remove said sign, and the cost of the removal shall be at the owner's expense. Okay, so that has been read into the record. There are some fairly significant changes to the draft we were looking at the last meeting. Creating an overlay district instead of a simple limited to IG zone. So it's quite a bit of language here.
Is Marcos here to speak on this? Yeah. But is that what you're here for? Is that what you came for?
Marcos offered to make himself available to the committee for whatever help he could provide to us.
Well, I'll make a motion to allow Marcos to.
Yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Councilor McGivern?
Just a question. My understanding was the building inspector was here to tell us the concerns he had that led us to this.
So the building commissioner had sent to us an email
To
this
who?
morning. Hang on.
I have questions for the building commissioner, but
He sent it to me, to you, to Todd, to Dave, I think the whole committee, Ordinance Committee, you, Todd McGee, this morning. Would you like a printed out copy that Dave printed? Joe?
At 20 of 8, how do I ask him a question?
Is Joe on this? I don't, to Todd and it's copied to,
Hang on.
I don't see Joe on there.
I don't have it.
No, you're not. It was the committee.
And at the bottom.
And Jeff Burkott?
Yeah, at bottom, the commissioner says he's available from 6:30 to 7:30. So, and I think.
The ordinance says he's available for us when we invite him, and he should be here.
Okay, so Marcos, I guess what would be most helpful would be if you could help us understand how this differs from. Councilor?
Point of order?
Sure.
So we closed our public hearing. So what?
So we've closed our
I just want
public
to get an
hearing.
understanding of what we're doing here.
Procedurally? Okay. So we've closed the public hearing. The planning board has closed their public hearing. They have given us this recommendation, which, for lack of any other way of getting it into the record tonight, I read into the record.
But it's okay for us to accept.
So both public hearings are closed, so we are now debating what amendments, if any, we want to make to the original ordinance that we passed. So Marcos had offered to come down to help explain anything, and there's a lot of new language here, so.
But just my point of order is just as simple as this, that though we closed our public hearing, we're still allowed to accept the recommendation of the planning committee.
No, this is what we were waiting for, that we had to
Okay.
accept
Yeah, that's just as
in
simple as that.
order to then go into further
you.
debate.
Thank you.
Thanks. So,
What kind of
no,
questions do you have? This is item number 3 in the ordinance agenda.
do you want an agenda? That would help. There you go. Okay, Marcos, if you would like to just help us understand, this is some pretty, very technical, weighty, and new
Sure.
language.
My pleasure. So as way of introduction, what the framework for the recommendation that the planning board provided mimics the recommendation that they had made in October, but it was modified to meet the goals and the feedback that was communicated to staff from the April 10th hearing that the city council had, where the city council had discussed this. So the outcomes that we believe was provided to staff, where the council was prioritizing these signs, the sizes, that's still here, that the city council is still the special permit granting authority. It's just in a different framework. And so it has the same criteria that was provided back in October. The major difference is, instead of saying that it's only allowable in one zone in the IG, that it's describing 2 specific overlay districts. The reason for that is that, and understanding that one particular entity has been requesting this in the interest of putting it in one location that's zoned IG, it's actually in an outlying area of the IG zone. And so the legislation would affect primarily the downtown area, where it's not necessarily been where it's been advocated for, or where off-premises signs wouldn't necessarily be most useful to attract the attention from basically vehicular traffic. So those 2 overlay districts are defined in the pictures that have been provided to you. One is an I-91 overlay district, which is essentially the properties east of I-91 off of exit 15. somewhat from the Cracker Barrel to the mall. The map that you have, so the overlay district is in yellow, and then the areas in blue and green are the buffer. So anything over blue and green would also be prohibited even if it is in the overlay district. And then the second overlay district is in the area where 391 ends. So both of those areas have some IG, but they have other zones where it would be allowable. However, it would not be permissible in all IG zones.
Can I ask another general question? Because
Sure.
clearly what the chair read into the record is very lengthy, but how much of it is actually new language and new amendments?
Well, new language and new amendments, I'm going to refer back to the October version. What we took is we took that,
The October version that only the planning board accepted and recommended.
the planning board recommended to the ordinance committee at that time.
Yeah.
So that was a framework that had 2 tiers of signage sizes, and only allowed the off-premises signs for a public entity. And there are several reasons for that I won't get into because it doesn't matter for this recommendation.
I'm sorry, I just didn't hear you. Only allowed.
It defined the use as a municipal facility, so it was only allowable to be built by a municipal entity like the city, HG&E, the HRA,
I just
stuff
didn't
like that.
hear you. Thank you.
So that had its own reasoning. I won't get into it because it's not germane to this discussion because that's been taken out. Now it's allowed by any private entity to be, or private, public, whoever, to do it. And there's no longer 2 tiers. Now it's just the same criteria applies to every sign. And the size limits are dictated by the underlying zone. So in the overlay district, if you're in a parcel that's zoned industrial general, then the size limitations will be that of an industrial general parcel. If you're on a business highway parcel, just like in the mall, the sign limitations will be those that apply to the business highway district and so forth.
So.
That's what we had in our last version as well.
Right, but what will that size now be in IG following those size limitations? Was that
So-
the 80 and the?
So the IG
100?
by right is I think it's 75 by right and 150 with a special permit. So it would follow.
So up to
the same.
75.
Up to 150.
And well, with a special permit, but as of right, up to 75. And in the BH, it was a little larger, right? So
And I
this
don't
is
have the book with me, but no, I think BH is smaller usually unless you're an anchor tenant that has at least 25,000 square feet.
right.
At which point you can go, I think, up to 200, if my memory serves me correct. So those tend to be rare.
BH is 40 and 80, and then the BH for 25,000 square feet or more is 200 and 300.
So at this point, what zones are included in this language? BH and IG?
So
Or in the overlay
an overlay doesn't say categorically all the zones would be included. It includes specific parcels, which may be zoned in different ways. So the parcels that are included on I-91, and I don't have an overlay for the zones, but some of them are BH, some of them are IG, some of them are business general, some of them are business limited. But it's not that all business limited and all business general and all business highways are included. It's only the specific
So the
area that's highlighted
only-
in the map.
Only the things on these 2 maps would
Correct.
be allowed to have the off-premises sign.
Correct. It's like when the POOD, for example, the POOD, which the council is very familiar with because you do the special permits for it. The POOD is basically a circle around a certain part around Route 5, and that is the district. So this would be a new overlay district, just like the POOD, but it's specifically defined for these areas marked here.
So it further limits.
Yes.
Joe? Councilor McGivern?
Marcus, the overlay district makes sense, but my question is, we went through a lengthy process and to specific language or specific change of language or creation of language for the off-premise sign, which is 647. And this is a major request by the planning board to the city council without a public hearing for the city council.
Is there a question in that, or do you want me to share my opinion on
Kind of a
that?
statement, I guess I'm saying is, how do we do it?
Well,
I mean, it looks like, and I, reading and listening as quickly as anybody here, that the planning board recommendation goes far beyond 647.
could you elaborate on that, how
Well,
it goes
I'm
beyond?
trying to catch up to reading, but 647, as we knew it, was the IG zone, what we've been working with. And now we're talking business highway, if it's in the overlay district, which I guess this is the overlay district, which we're seeing for the first time.
Well, it depends on whether you saw the material in November or not, but I won't get into that. It's not that the overlay district encompasses all zones. It's that it encompasses a specific geography. That geography, that some parcels may be zoned one way or another, but it's not encompassing of all parcels in that zone. You gotta think about it in layers. There's an underlying layer that says, you know, your house may be RA and your neighbor's house may be BH, right? So those are in two different zones. That exists all throughout the city. So anytime you modify a BH zone, the business highway, it'll apply to every parcel that is on BH everywhere in the city, regardless of where it is. An overlay zone says very specifically, this neighborhood that we draw, this circle that we draw, regardless of how it's zoned, this new level of regulation will apply to it. So I wouldn't describe it as more encompassing, I would say it's more limiting, because if you make a legislation for the IG, it will apply to all parcels at RG everywhere in the city, which may be dramatically different. Think of, in the IG, you can think of, mostly it's in downtown industrial parks. There's a very small presence of IG around the mall, but you're talking about, you know, the charter school, you're talking about the former Mount Tom power plant. So that may not be the areas where it's most optimal to have an off-premise sign. And so what this is doing is it's taking a goal-oriented approach, saying where would it be more optimal to have these signs and regulate them? They would be in the places where there is a lot of traffic off of highways and for commercial uses. So one of them is the gateway to the large commercial area of the mall. The second one is a gateway into the downtown, and also some commercial presence in the South Street Plaza, and an industrial park just south of the downtown.
Counselor
And
Lacey?
if I,
Oh, I'm sorry.
not even
You
close
have
to
the
being
floor.
done.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Marcus, I said, I'm not in disagreement with the concept of an overlay zone, but you're putting an overlay zone, let me rephrase and put it in the form of a question, over existing properties that are owned by people who have not been notified of this.
So the legalities of this will have to be addressed by the law department. We're not taking or restricting any right that they have or granting them additional rights.
Well, you are granting an additional possibility of a sign going up on or near their property. That's my question.
Crystal, do you have any thoughts on that question?
And I think the original order is just to create an off-premises sign ordinance. I think where we zone it is just an amendment that would naturally be made.
Well, Just to clarify, though, we have an ordinance, and the order that was filed was to bring it into conformity for the narrow purpose of accomplishing the goal for which we originally wrote the ordinance. It's not really to create an ordinance, it's just to clean it up so that the permit could be given. We have-
Limiting the language, going back to Crystal's comment, but limiting the language to, for the off-premise sign to a zone or to a number of zones is correct. But creating an overlay within zones that already exist is, as much as I like it, I think it's beyond the scope of the order that's been before us.
I agree. We've had the discussion about the breadth of it before, so that's something we can consider as we go through the review. Are you all set for now? For the moment? Okay, thanks. Counselor Lisi?
Thank you. So I did have a chance to look at the, version that the planning board passed in November. What I heard, I'm only hearing, what was read into the record tonight. I'm not actually able to see it. It sounds still like it's far more comprehensive than even just addressing the limited set of amendments that would address the points of conflict in what we passed previously. And I think we were making a lot of progress at the last couple of meetings in terms of, it was very limited in terms of the number of amendments that we were looking at in order to get the ordinance to work. What the planning board has passed, puts a far greater level of detail into the ordinance than what we were considering in both sets of processes, right? So we had an original process that led to conflicted language. We reopened up the issue and the public hearings to look again at how we can mitigate those problems. We had recommendations that I understood came from your department, planning, and the building department on how to mitigate those problems, and Crystal communicated them to us in a, again, very limited list, and what I hear the planning board referring to us now is a lot more details about the lights and the signage and the number of seconds that a sign can be on. And I just don't think that, to Councilor McGivern's point, we weren't holding a public hearing on any of those details. What we had a conversation about was about the conflicts, and there was a limited number of conflicts. And I can support an overlay zone, but I don't think that's very different than what we were looking at previously, because even within the overlay zone, we can limit it to IG and BH and follow the sign dimensions that are laid out in the zoning regulations. Yeah, so here it is, section 6.6.8. And yeah, I think it says only allowed in IG zones following the size limitations for size in the business and industrial districts table. And I think we could totally further limit that to the overlay zones here. I think that's totally fine. That's not a problem. But the details about the megawatts, and really, I don't think that we're prepared to incorporate those details into the ordinance, because we have not had public hearing on those details, in my opinion. Perhaps the planning board did, but we did not.
I'm happy to answer any questions, and I don't know if I'm sensing that people are trying to explain to me what they don't like.
No.
It's not. I'm not offended if you don't agree with it. I will say, however, that the method of public hearing, and this is my own opinion, I may be wrong, doesn't require you to discuss exactly the same things that the planning board did. If the planning board is providing a recommendation on what they think is technically needed to address a particular concern. So to the point of lighting, for example, you may not have discussed it, but this is why there's another board that can discuss ideas and provide them, precisely because you didn't discuss it, not despite the fact that they thought a concern of some residents would be someone will try to maximize the use of a signage with lighting that is very intense and bothersome to some people. So there are standards in the industry on how you measure that, so that when someone complains and says that is too bright, there's a way of defining what too bright is. And so that's based off of certain best practices. If the body doesn't believe that's necessary, fine, but you have something to look at and consider.
So the way I see it, we have two paths forward. One is I'd like, since we have Marcos here, to have Marcos weigh in on the limited number of amendments that we have from the April 10th draft that we were looking at. And the other path forward is to, since we don't, I mean, again, I don't have a copy of even the recommendation that planning board approved tonight, in order to look at it and say, okay, I understand this. I'm so glad that they took care of that in their public hearing. Let's incorporate that into our final draft language. I mean, I feel like, how could I possibly adopt all of the changes that were just recommended to us when we're just receiving it tonight for the first time? So either we're tabling it to look at and incorporate the changes that the planning board made, or we can adopt an off-premise sign ordinance. And I think that the April 10th version that Crystal handed us was, again, shopped around to the different departments and addressed the conflicts that were present in the ordinance that we passed previously. I mean, that's...
So we would be amending the current ordinance by those changes.
Yep.
So we do have, I think that's a good way of stating it, that we have a couple of choices. One is much more complex and one is simpler. I just have a couple of questions for Marcos if everybody else is all set. In the language, part of what concerned me is it said if the off-premises freestanding sign will be installed abutting a residential district or at a gateway to the city, the owner shall install the landscaping and et cetera, and it seemed like there were a whole bunch.
What section is this, so I can take a look?
It's the first page. It is under the 6.4.6.8.2 I. And they would have to put a landscape plan, et cetera, so, and it has to be by an architect or something. I mean, so my question was, where are the gateways to the city? I mean, I've been in a number of meetings where certain areas are referred to as gateways to the city. Are these overlay districts in gateways to the city that would then be subject to all this level of detail of certain credentialed people providing the plans and all the rest?
Admittedly, it's not defined here, and it's probably a flaw in the ordinance. It's probably referencing an area directly adjacent to the right-of-way versus a sign that would be, for example, to take an example, the I-91 district, a sign can be facing the highway. That is not a gateway, that is just something where you're passing by, whereas something that is immediately on the city right-of-way would be a gateway. The intersection of High Street and 391, for example, would be a gateway, whereas if you're just putting a sign...
So is the exits and the entrances to 91
so
gateways?
Are those what I'm saying is it's not defined, so that's a flaw. So two options would be, one is striking that language so that it's not confusing or further defining it. But admittedly, it is a flaw in that it's not defined.
Yeah, I guess what I was a little taken aback by is there's these huge setbacks or distances where things aren't allowed. I mean, we're allowing all other kinds of things with like no setbacks, 50 feet of setbacks, but a sign can't be within like these huge setbacks of a park, of a land, I mean, I don't know, it just seems to me to be, I don't know, very complicated.
So if I may react to that, there are elements here that can be taken out and the ordinance still works. So for example, with the landscaping and the buffers, it is legacy language reflecting the fact that the original recommendation was for signage that was potentially much bigger, up to 800 square feet. And so the buffers reflect larger signage. If because the signage is much smaller and therefore there's a lesser concern, one option is eliminating language, for example, eliminating I, right? So a 150 square foot sign is just going to be 150 square feet of landscaping. To give you an idea, that's about the size of a parking space. So not a lot of landscaping to be done there. So that can be completely stricken if it's considered to be too onerous. The buffer's the same. It's just a parameter. It's just taking the 500, the 400, and 300, that can be tweaked. That can immediately be changed.
Okay, so.
People feel very strongly
I
about,
just want to
seeing
step back
signs.
from the whole thing for a minute, because this whole thing was intended to be a very narrow ordinance to try these off-premises signs to see if they seem like they're a good idea at all. So there was nobody in the room that was wedded to thinking these were the latest, greatest things to market the city necessarily. It was viewed almost more as creating an ordinance to sort of create the opportunity for a pilot project. Now, the concerns that I've heard is that the IG zone being interspersed throughout the city could land an accessory sign or an off-premises sign, in a little tiny lot downtown, which of course was never the intent of the ordinance, and since it's a special permit, it would get ruled out on its face as being not in character of blah, 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 blah. Because, a special permit is allowed as a special permit.
Well, what's special to this council may not be special to the next council. We're creating
No.
legislation, and so
Well-
it's up to the discretion of.
Well, that is
body.
correct. That is correct, but the intent does matter, as do all the details in this very broad language. And I would just echo what Councilor McGivern said. What was advertised for these public hearings, and I don't have a problem with the technical language added in from the planning board. We need that. We don't know about lots and this and that. And so I welcome those kind of technical changes. I do have a problem with broadening it, where the order that was advertised was to bring it into conformity, not to expand it. And so I just want to do that and get it done in the simplest way possible, personally. But Councilor Anderson Burgos.
Yeah, I was reading Damien's email, and it says here, to this day, in the quote, so to this day, I have not received a request for this information or about the content or issues with the ordinance from any member of the city council, meaning that he hasn't gotten any kind of communication. And I think Damien is a big part of this, so we should have him here.
Well, here's the thing. He was here, and he met with all of the involved parties that created the draft that got presented to us in the public hearing. So we have heard from him, not personally, directly.
We've not been able to ask him questions.
Right, but he also gave a window from 6:30 to 7:30.
Right.
In a public setting.
Right, but we were on another matter from 6:30 to 7:30.
Right.
So, but the points that he made and the language that was of concern to him have been addressed by him and the other departments in the draft that was provided to us in the public hearing. And I didn't even get his email till after I got home from work.
Right, right.
And I answered him, and I let him know that the draft had been received in the public hearing, that at this point we had to wait for the planning board before we could move forward with
Right.
debate on the matter. But his issues and his concerns are in the draft. As far as what I believe, Crystal, is my understanding correct in that regard?
Can you ask me again?
So when we were in the public hearing and we received the draft, my recollection is that that draft language was the consolidation of all the discussions between all the involved departments, building, planning, etc. And that culmination of discussion led to the draft, which we have, that we received in the public hearing.
Correct. The draft legal form I gave you was planning department, building department, and myself. But that was without any input from planning board, which is a
Correct.
separate.
Correct, but we're just, right now, we're just discussing the email from Damien and the concerns that he puts in this letter. I answered him and said we had received his language in the draft that we received during the public hearing. So we had heard from him formally in that regard. Going way back, I mean, there were many emails and things back and forth. So, but that was the formal communication that was the result of all the departments meeting together that we received and understood was the fix. So now again, we have a broader recommendation to go with the more narrow recommendation. And to me, we've already found a couple problems with the broad recommendation, and I don't have an appetite for spending more weeks on this. So my preference would be to go with the narrow reading that fixes it, which is in keeping with the order that said fix it. That's all it said. I talked to the maker of the order. He said I was asked to fix it, so I filed the order to fix it. He said it's simple as that. There was no other intent to it. So if people are comfortable with the narrow language that fixes it, I say we go with that. And if we have to again fix it later because we have a city council that gets elected that thinks it's great to put all kinds of 40 or 50-foot signs on quarter-acre lots in downtown, which I can't really picture, I'm not really worried about that eventuality. I'm really not. I would request from the committee a motion relative to the more narrow amendments to get it fixed and get it done. What is the pleasure of the committee? Crystal, do you have that last draft? I have so many different renditions, I'd be afraid to read off of one. I just want to see if everybody can look at it to know, you know, that we're, what we're referencing. Edit to add.
I don't know if that was something we were gonna add back in to have a fee.
May I?
Councilor Bartley.
Well, I would suggest that we, in light of all this hard work that was put in by the planning board, I would like a chance to, and while I appreciate your oral presentation, I'd like the chance to read it myself, compare it to what we have, and in fairness, I would also suggest that while I was here and put a lot of time and effort into developing this originally, and I thought we had a good ordinance originally, Apparently, we couldn't get there, but I have to say, I'm intrigued by the overlay district, and I don't know why we can't consider that now and just get it over with and over and done with. So, that being said, I'd rather table it myself, and so I can understand what the planning board has written, and we can look at it in 2 weeks. That's just my one small, well, I didn't make a motion, I'm throwing out there for discussion. I'm throwing out for discussion, because it's just out of fairness, but I would want to have, in 2 weeks, I know we have Mr. McManus here, I would want to make sure we have Marcos here as well, and/or Mr. Cody here, and if we could take it up at 6:30 on the dot, so Mr. Cody could be with us. I just think out of fairness, that's what we should do.
And I think that would answer Counselor McGivern's concerns, to be able to get the answers directly.
Councilor McGivern's got a lot of questions. He may not be able to tuck it into an hour, but I'm sure he'll.
I have one question.
I'm sure he'll.
I'm intrigued by the overlay zone. Can we do it under this format? Everything I've been taught says no. Go with the simple stuff, and we can go forward with the overlay zone, with another hearing.
Down the road, yeah, Joe.
If you're gonna go with the language tonight, there's the 32 feet, we talked about changing that to, I think,
40,
37 or 38,
40.
40 feet?
If you go with the language, it gets deleted altogether, and it bases off the chart.
Oh, right. Then that goes to
Because if
75.
you're on premises, you can have the size, so what's the difference? I mean, it's not like you're making it so that there's bigger signs allowed, it's just this guy owns it versus this guy.
I was talking about the draft language at the last meeting,
Right, so it
at
deletes,
32.
it deletes that though.
If I may.
Is there a fee schedule in here? I thought there wasn't.
Counselor Lisi?
I believe that in November, December of last year, whenever the conflict came to light, I believe I filed an order saying that we take a look at a comprehensive sign ordinance. So I think there's an order out there that we could actually utilize to look at the full set of technical amendments that the planning board just gave us. But I do think we're in a position where we can adopt the amendments that we've been looking at for the past several weeks.
Right, I think we would have to advertise separately to do the broader, because there's one on yours that is very general, that would allow for almost any change to be made to the sign ordinance, because it's very broad. And then there's a separate one, I think, on billboards too. So those could be taken up, and then those would be in the proper venue to discuss, and you could talk overlay, you could talk everything, because it would be broad.
I do think that it's absolutely a possibility to put in the overlay zone alongside of the streamlined set of amendments that we have. I mean, I do like the idea of the overlay zone because it further limits, and it makes it more appropriate where we might find these different, billboards, or off-premise signs that are directional. You're not going to need them in a dense area downtown. It's really only a need for these highway gateways.
Right, and just to that point, I'm confident a city council wouldn't put a 75-foot sign in a little IG lot downtown. On the other hand, to Councilor McGivern's point, if you're gonna talk about an overlay and affect the owners, they need to be properly notified, because it is affecting their property.
But I think we can create the overlay and say that it's only IG and BH properties within the overlay. I think that's the way to kind of have our cake and eat it too, essentially. Because what the present ordinance says that we would be considering is IG and BH only, and with the overlay, we could say IG and BH only within these two overlays. And I think that it's not stretching beyond the conversations that we've been having.
Well, not trying to be too picky, but the current ordinance only allows in IG. We started out with BH, then it was changed from BH to IG. So the current zone that an off-premises sign is allowed in is only IG. There is no BH in the mix. And I think if we're gonna expand these large signs to these other zones, it needs to be a public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry, it is IG only, but it talks about the business and industrial districts table, and that's why I had the business in my
Yeah,
head.
no problem, no problem.
Okay.
I'm not trying to be picky.
So I mean, I think we could say IG zones within this overlay and define the overlay, and I think that's a really good place to start, and it really incorporates some of the more straightforward and relevant pieces that we could understand based on what we've been discussing.
I don't see it creating a problem. The only problem I see with it is the process problem that Councilor McGivern raised, that it wasn't advertised that we're creating an overlay district, and then we're creating a district. Remember when we did the POOD, it was a big deal.
Well, but Madam Chair, if that argument holds weight, then it has to hold weight in every situation, right? When it was advertised, it wasn't advertised to everyone in the IG that this regulation was going to be
It was
created there.
advertised to anyone reading it.
Well, but then the same could be said about this, right? That's what I'm saying, that there has to be an argument has to carry both ways.
Yeah,
So
no,
I think you're in the clear anyway, but
Yeah.
you can't be okay modifying the IG without advertising, but then advertising is a problem for the overlay.
No,
That's
but yeah, so like the overlay is a more narrow subset of all the IG districts in the city. So if we advertise for IG, then we're covered with an
But it was
overlay.
never advertised for IG.
You're right, but our discussion referred to
Was
IG, so that's what was
advertised to
discussed
create-
during the public hearing process.
Correct. It was advertised to create an off-premises sign.
In your
ordinance.
public hearing process, but someone would have had to see an advertisement in order to hear that discussion. And,
For an off-premises sign, which was what the ad was for.
right, so, I mean, what I'm saying is, I think you're fine either way.
All right, all right. Okay, so we have one school of thought that says we could modify and add in the overlay for the IG portion that's been described, and then take the amendments that we already reviewed that would accomplish the goal and allow for the ordinance to come into compliance and be in effect.
So I'd
So I
like
mean, it's
to,
really, what-
so I'd like to make a motion that we accept the amendments that we've been discussing since the April 10th meeting, and we amend them further by amending section 6.4.6.8, off-premise signs allowed only in IG zones within the overlay district defined by, however we're defining the overlay district. And we could just pull the language from,
We'll say as depicted for the moment. And then,
or it's defined in the recommendation, right? That they gave us? Yeah, so it's defined, so amend section 6.4.6, off-premise signs, A, to allow only in IG zones, following the size limitations for the signs in the business industrial tables, districts tables.
for IG.
Yep. Within the overlay zone as defined by the planning board's recommendation. So that would be the only other amendment you need to add to the draft that we've been looking at.
Oh, hang on. It's right here, and I didn't write all over it. Oh, you don't want to try to read mine.
And then I would urge the chair to take up the order that I filed about a comprehensive sign ordinance so that we could revisit some of these and advertise. But I do think that they probably put some good thought, time, and energy.
Right.
And it would be great to understand and incorporate some of those amendments, but.
Right, and I think regardless of whether people feel favorable or unfavorable toward billboards, there's no harm in having a discussion about them. But it would just have to be put out in a
Advertised.
proper way, that people know it will come up. Yeah, so people know what's going on, yeah.
So Crystal, do you understand what?
So you're looking at
we're accepting all of the amendments that you've been proposing to us
Right.
in that document. And then somewhere along the way in that section 6.4.6.8,
Yep.
we want to define the overlay zone. And the planning board's recommendation has that overlay zone defined for both the 391 corridor and the exit 15 off of 91 corridor.
So we're looking at, they're allowed only in IG zones following the size limitations for signs in business and industrial districts table. And then the definitions about, is it IG zone as defined by the overlay districts?
Yes.
So we're not including the entire overlay district,
The
just
IG
IG
zones
zones
in
within
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I think that's the best we could do at this point.
yeah. And we have to be sure that it's still a city council special permit in the draft.
I can add that back in. I don't think it's here.
I think we only had
I
city
think that was
council's
what my note was for.
special permit for the larger
sign.
ones.
Any,
Any? Okay.
and we had already approved it, so then the technical question is, do we have to reapprove it now that we have amended the ordinance to?
No, I think we could have it sent to.
I think we're gonna have to So, under suspension of rules, Crystal, so right now, we have a motion made. And we need a second for that.
Second.
Okay, so the motion has been made and seconded. It has, that we accept the proposed revisions and we add the overlay zone as depicted for IG only, and it remains a special permit of the city council. So technical question. If this committee recommends it to the council and if the council approves it, does the applicant who was previously approved for the special permit then need to reapply under the new ordinance? Or if the intent was clearly to make it come into compliance to allow for the building permit, we would then have corrected the problem?
I think I'm gonna use my discretion here and say that his permit's still going to apply, and this makes it so his permit, normally I'd say amend his special permit, but his permit was, or his application is probably fine. It's the ordinance that was hard to
Yeah.
decipher, so
Okay,
I don't.
okay. I just wanted to clarify that while we're in the public meeting. Okay, so we have a motion before us. Are there any other concerns, additions, amendments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So the motion carries 4-0. It'll be sent to city council for our next meeting. Thank you. Thank you for coming, Marcos. We really appreciate it. Okay. Well, no reasonable person would believe. All the other mics are on, Gary. Good night. Okay, all right, so now we're on to 5. Right?
Cinco.
Yeah.
Can I have a motion?
Who's Lopez?
Are we ready? Do we have
Motion to take
anything
up number
to do
5?
with this right now, though?
I'm sorry?
Do we have anything new to address with this?
Item 5?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I'm not positive, but I put it on the agenda, and just for the public. Item 5 is filed by Counselor Lopez. In an abbreviated reading, it was about creating an ordinance to deal with any issuance of any credit or debit cards, given the issues and problems that had arisen with them. So we had tabled this at a prior meeting, waiting for legal language. We had gone through and found that we had received the information. At one of our more recent meetings, we received the communication and the documentation from the treasurer and the auditor. And so the last request was to send it to legal for language to create the ordinance that should any credit or debit card be issued, it would need to be approved by the city council, and there was also an amendment made and sent to legal that there would be an upper limit on any card. I think we said 2,500 is my recollection. And so what we're looking for is the language so that we can create the ordinance at this point. And I did put it on because I was going through it with Ryan and saw my notes relative to that, and I didn't want to lose track of it. But if you haven't had time to,
I don't know that we have that order. Yeah, I get them in my mailbox. I don't know that I've seen this one.
oh, okay, because we have taken this up 3 separate times.
Right, but they have to get delivered to us so that we know what we're supplying language for. I don't believe we have this one, but
You mean from the prior meeting?
we usually get a copy from Ryan when you send to legal for legal language. I
Okay.
don't know that we have this one.
Okay, all right, so I'll accept an order to table, and we're just looking to finish this. All right? All in favor?
Aye.
So I'll just note table for language, and Ryan, if you're watching, we're looking for the order so that we can get this completed.
A motion to take up number 6.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 6, filed by Counselor Leahy, that the city creates an ordinance on recreational marijuana regarding the taxation of the products that will be manufactured and or sold. Oh, could I ask that we suspend rules and take up 6, 7, and 8?
Moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 7, filed by Counselor Roman, that we put a tax on cultivators of marijuana, $9.25 per dry weight ounce of marijuana flowers, $2.75 for dry weight ounce of marijuana leaves. Item 8, filed by Counselor Lisi, ordered that the City of Holyoke accept General Law C-64N, Section 3, to impose an excise tax on the retail sales of marijuana for adult use at the rate of 3%. So we have those before us. At the last meeting, we had talked about whether Counselor Leahy's order was broad enough so that we could just take the language from the state and adopt it, but since then you filed the order with the exact language, so we're all coming together on the same point of the intent of his order. So, we each received a copy of the language at the last city council meeting. So I don't know, are there any questions that anybody has relative to probably moving on item 8, since it is the exact language that the state allows and that we have received? Crystal?
So this was a bulletin that was released from DLS. The exact language to adopt is that the City of Holyoke imposed a local excise on the retail sales of marijuana under General Laws, Chapter 64N, Section 3, at the rate of insert, but it's, I think 3 is what we're going with, 3%.
Is that the max?
Yes.
3% of what?
This is on retail sales, so it's like a sales tax.
3% of the sale or 3% of the sale?
The retail sale, yep.
And our meals tax is 3.5%, what is it?
Or what tax?
The meals
I
tax?
don't know off the top of my head.
I feel like we added something. Just trying to get a sense of what 3.5% might be.
Well, it just depends how much is sold, right? How much it would translate into. With the meals, they had an idea of what the volume will be. Who knows what this volume will be? I don't know.
I know right now that's the only tax that we are adopting at this time. I don't think the state's given us any ability to adopt taxes as far as on cultivation or growing yet. That's all part of our host community agreements that we deal with. As far as the taxing kind of all happens in those agreements. But as far as retail excise tax, this is like exact language coming down from them.
Okay, so how about if we table item 6 and, 6 and 8 go together, from what I can see.
Right.
So if we adopt 6 and 8, they don't compete with each other. They're complementary. And then we could table item 7. Counselor McGivern?
Just a curiosity question, but Crystal, do you know who on the local level is responsible for collecting this tax?
I don't
Who collects the meal tax?
The restaurants.
Yeah, but how do we get it? That's the thing.
Well, right, but I mean, they
Not
have to-
everyone's collecting it, I'm just questioning is who's, you know, is it coming in or is it not, and who
Department of Revenue,
says?
just like anyone else, just
Yeah.
Department of Revenue. They would, it would all.
The local
and then
tax.
they give it
Yes,
back,
at the
right?
0.75, sure,
think-
it's paid in by the retailer to the Commonwealth, goes to the Department of Revenue, and the Department of Revenue sends it back to the city of
Yeah,
Holyoke.
that's
Now,
my understanding.
I've never seen it on a cherry sheet. Maybe I just haven't looked close enough.
The way it should work anyhow.
I'm sure it's in
Makes
here. Hold
sense.
on,
Thank
I'm
you.
reading.
So does somebody want to make a motion on item 6 and 8?
I don't know, I would say motion to adopt, but if I say adopt to both of them, does that mean we have to have something produced for both of them? Or so like, should we
No.
just give complied with to item number 6 or?
Well, it's saying creates an ordinance regarding taxation, and yours says how to do it.
Sure,
So I just say adopt them and accept the language provided by the state,
okay.
right?
The only thing is, I think that the way that we vote on things in full city council, we would need to, if there's something to be adopted, then we have to go first and second reading, pass the ordinance, and if we're only passing one real
Well,
language
right,
ordinance.
we will have to have the ordinance in legal form under 1, which would be under 8. So I guess under 6, we could say adopt and find it complied with. And then under 8, adopt and put it in legal language.
Yeah,
How about we do that?
You're not creating an ordinance, you're just accepting a general law.
That's all
Oh,
we're doing.
true.
Oh, yes, you're right.
That's all we're doing, yeah.
All right, so under 6, we don't need an ordinance.
And under 8 neither, actually.
Right,
We're just accepting the
Exactly.
general language from the state, so.
Motion to adopt.
Second
all in favor?
Aye.
So we're adopting item 8.
and 6. Tabling 7. Did we motion on that?
Not yet.
Motion to table item number 7?
Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, on to
Take up number 9.
item 9, filed by Counselor McGivern, order to establish a fee to accompany tort claims to the city law department. Suggested fee is $15. Successful claims would be granted fee reimbursement. Counselor McGivern?
Real quick on my part, the law department asked me, they make good argument for why this should be done. And if there are any questions, I will certainly defer them to the law department.
There you go.
So we've come to determine that when these tort claims come in, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that has to happen. And in general, we're kind of behind the times on accepting a fee for that work. Normally, even if you think about getting into a car accident and you want to file a claim, there's usually some sort of deductible you pay or some fee you pay in order to file that claim. So the fact, we've looked at other municipalities and that's where we kind of get the $15, is that it seemed pretty accurate with other municipalities that collect this fee. So the caveat is that if your claim is successful, so we determine that, yes, your car was damaged by a city vehicle or you hit a pothole and that damaged your car, that $15 is credited back to you if your claim is successful. If not, I mean, obviously the city would, part of you filing is just, it's a filing fee of $15. And it helps some of the paperwork, the documentation that goes into this. Everybody, there's multiple departments that go into every tort claim, as far as, we have to get checks from somebody and somebody's got to make their requisition for that. And we have to send out letters back and forth to confirm that either DPW went out and saw the pothole, didn't do anything about it, or,
Right.
that this actually happened, and collecting police reports, and just numerous things go into this. So it just seemed like it was time to maybe recoup some of that cost.
Counselor Lisi?
Does $15 sound appropriate, or is $25? I mean, the way that you're describing it, I'm going, oh, it sounds a lot more
It was just
involved
what
than
we-
$15.
Looking at others, it just seemed like others had a similar fee, so that's where we got that. But if you want to increase it,
Well, yeah.
And if they,
I hear your argument, but to the defense of the citizens who incur the damage, I think it feels like a double punishment if they have to pay to try to get the insurance money after they already had the problem. I mean, I'm a little, you know what I mean?
Well, it's,
Yeah, I mean,
but it's
I wouldn't wanna
returned to
make it too
them.
much.
It's returned to them if they're successful.
Well, right, and I could see that it would deter people who just run around filing claims, but do we have a lot of people that repeatedly file claims?
Pothole season is the worst.
No, but do we have,
Repeat offenders?
but do we have people who seem to routinely file claims and collect money from the city?
I'm not sure. I'd have to really dig.
Right, so, but that's not the reason why you're doing this.
No, I mean, some of that is to deter those people who, I know some people replace multiple tires a year, and it's like, what are you doing? How do you hit that many potholes in 1 year? I think some of it is that, some of it is also, like I said, the administrative cost that goes into all of this. But some of it is to kind of, do you really want to file that claim? Do you just want to maybe replace the mailbox? I don't know. Some of that. It's a little of both.
Yeah, all right. Well, does somebody want to make a motion?
Does anyone have any
Any
opinion
other
on the $15?
comments?
Does anyone think it should be more?
No, that's what the law department wants, and
I don't think it should be more.
All right, so motion to accept and adopt the language.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chair, just a quick point of order.
Yeah. Counselor Bartley?
I was just looking at, for our last order, number 8, the Mass General Law reads as follows. Any city or town may impose a local sales tax upon sale or transfer of marijuana by a marijuana retailer operating within the city to anyone other than a marijuana establishment at a rate not greater than 2% of the local, it says 2% in the online version of the Mass General Law, Section 3 of
What was
Chapter.
it?
That just hasn't been updated. We asked the same question.
So I just want to make sure that this is, that
We're going for the extra
so
percentage.
it's up to 3%, so.
Correct. It's a specific memo we got from DLS. But from what I heard, because that went through our Mass Municipal Lawyers Association
Good.
listserv, that everyone was confused about that. It just hasn't been updated yet.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, we're on to item 10.
Can we keep item 10 tabled and take up 11, 12, and 13 as a package?
Sure. On the motion to take up as a package, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion
Let
to,
me find my, I'm not sure they were all recommended to approve. Let me just,
well, motion to adopt the Commission on Disabilities recommendations, whatever they are.
I just wanted to caution that I'm not sure if they were all. Okay, so Anna Cruz. It's recommended that it be denied. The home is owned by Cruz's son. The driveway is 2 cars wide and deep.
Okay.
So that's that one. Maria Vasquez, 195 Suffolk Street. A site, oh no. Recommend application approved, Don Welch, 4/23/18. There's no other further comment, but there was quite a detailed explanation on the application. So that was recommended to be approved.
Great.
And 179 Oak Street for Herberto Morales. Recommend that the application be denied. There is allowed use of off-street parking.
Allowed?
Allowed.
Allowed, okay.
Driveway, 2 cars wide and deep.
All right, so on the motion, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that it, Madam Chair?
I believe that brings us to the end of our
All right, motion to
agenda.
adjourn.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are officially adjourned.
Great.
All right. Thank you all.